In this video tutorial, we're going to be building an entire nav bar from scratch using Flexbox with HTML and CSS. The mobile view kind of looks like this, you can see, with the hamburger menu that flies out our menu up and down. Notice the button styles are different between mobile and our tablet view, where we have just the login and sign up links, all the way up to our desktop view, where we pop in also our additional links. So follow along, and I hope you learned something. Is go ahead and flesh out our HTML. Now I've just got some boilerplate HTML code here linked off to my CSS sheet. So you'll want to go ahead and create a CSS and HTML sheet and link those guys together if you haven't already done that. So what we're going to do is in our body tag, we're just going to simply have a nav tag. And this nav is going to be the sort of parent element for our navigation items. And then inside of here, we're going to have several list items. So I'm going to do li, let's see, times, I don't know, looks like, let me check my notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, looks like we're going to have 7. And each of those 7 tags are going to have an anchor. So something like that ought to do it. That's the Emmet script shorthand there. You just type that out and hit tab, or you can type it out by hand. And for each of these, for right now, we're just going to say they're going to have, they're not going to really go anywhere for right now. Okay, so this first list item is going to be our logo or our brand name. So we're just going to call this guy followandrew.dev. That's my website. I'll save and refresh so you can see the changes here over here as we're coding live. Now we're going to be starting off building the mobile version first, and then we'll scale up to the tablet and then desktop. Second here, we'll just kind of name these links randomly here, home, about, and we'll call this one services. And then we're going to have this one down here be our login. This one down here is going to be our sign up. And the final one here is actually going to be our hamburger menu. So we're going to do that inside of a span tag. And we'll just give it right now the class of bars. Okay, so we're going to eventually design in some hamburgers with those bars. So it's going to be an empty hidden tag on desktop. Okay, let's come over here and define some class names for each of these list items. So the first one is going to be our logo. Then I'm going to copy this down and we're going to paste it right here. And this one's just going to be a list item. So I'm just going to call it an item, a regular sort of navigation item. And I'll copy this to this one, this one. So those will be items. This one's going to be an item. This one's going to be item. And this one down here is going to be the class of toggle. Okay, so we have all of these are items, a logo, and a toggle. And then these two, the login and sign up, because they're designed a little bit differently, as you saw from the preview, we're going to give them some extra classes so that we can design them. So this one's going to be a button, and this one's also going to be a button, but it's going to be a secondary button because it's going to have just an outline instead of a filled background. So this gives us all the classes we need to really start our HTML. Now, in order to make this work, let's go ahead and just add down here a section called main, and we'll just put in here an anchor tag for right now. We'll just leave it blank, but we'll just call this, I don't know, we'll link to the YouTube channel. How's that? youtube.com/channel/follow Andrew. So we'll have that little link down there at the bottom, and that should probably do it. So, whoops. This, well, yeah, sure. Let's maybe move that down to the bottom so it's not in the road. So we'll say style, we'll just give this a position of fixed, and we'll move it to the bottom 0. So it's clear down there at the bottom out of the road. So this is kind of the main area, right, of the website, and then we'll be building out the nav in the top. So that's pretty much it for the HTML, just a regular nav tag, a bunch of list items with classes. The one thing I did forget to add is our unordered list. So we do want to have the parent unordered list tag here so that we remain nice and semantic, if you will. And then we'll tab all this stuff over. Whoops. As well. Okay, so we have our unordered list. Then we've got all of our list items inside of there. So that pretty much does it. I'll just squeeze this over so you can see the HTML. Whoops, right there. I'm going to squeeze it over. And most of the work now is going to be done in our CSS as we build this nav bar from scratch using Flexbox. So let's jump over here to our CSS sheet. and we will get started with the CSS code. So there's quite a bit of it. I think, let me check my notes. In my little notes, I have around 160 lines of CSS. So this will take just a little bit of time here, but it's well worth it. So we're going to start off and we're going to do a rule. Remember, the star rule is the catch-all, meaning it's going to affect all elements, every single HTML element. We're going to change the box sizing to border box. And the border box makes it so the box model actually changes, and our padding and margin go all the way to the edges now, instead of kind of having to calculate that height and width differently. So if you're not familiar with the box model, I've got videos on that describe how that works. Let's go ahead and set padding to 0, and we're going to set margin to 0 so that we don't have any padding and margin on any elements. Okay, so you can see now here that is applying. I always like to do this whenever I add a CSS sheet. We're going to set the background color to red just so I can make sure it's working, because I noticed that didn't do what I expected. And you can see it's not working. So I have an issue here. So let's jump over to my navbar, and oh yep, I've linked to the wrong name. So this is supposed to be navbar.css, because that's what I called my CSS sheet. Now you can see, once I have fixed that, everything looks correct. So we can get rid of this little rule I added there. So let's just change the font family here to a sans serif font as we're working through this. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is on our actual nav element, let's go ahead and set the background. I'm just going to set this to 222, which is kind of a dark gray you can see over there on the side. And then let's give some padding. So we're going to say padding of 5 pixels on the top and bottom, and 20 pixels on the left and right. So that adds a little bit of padding there on our nav. That looks fine there. So next, let's go ahead and change a few of the properties of the unordered list. We want to change the list style type to none, because we don't want the bullets. They're kind of hard to see there, but you can actually see the bullets, in fact, are in place there for our elements. So as soon as I save and refresh that, you can see all those bullets are gone. So that's pretty much what we're going to do there. This is just some base styles we're adding here. Let's change the color of all of our anchor tags to white so we can actually see them. And we're going to get rid of the underline with text dash decoration of none, so that they don't have the default underline there on our anchor tags either. And let's set up a hover state. So when we hover over these, we'll have our a:hover rule, and it's going to be text decoration underline. So in other words, as I hover over them, they will underline themselves like so. Just something really simple. Okay. So let's go ahead and affect a couple of, let's do the list items. So we're going to do now remember, we need to actually come back to our HTML. I forgot to give my unordered list because I forgot to add that earlier. I'm going to give it a class name. So let's call this class of menu, just so that we can target that class and not just do the general UL selector for this little tutorial. So now that I've added that, we can say dot menu. And for the menu here, we're going to add in, again, this is the unordered list, so you kind of have to remember that. So let's go back over here. Dot menu li. So all of the list items inside of our menu. Let's change the font size. So we're going to maybe go with 16 pixels there for the font size, which is 16 point is the default font size in browsers. And then we're going to give padding of 15 pixels and 5 pixels. So 15 on the top and bottom, and 5 on the left and right. And again, we're building the mobile menu first. So this is the menu that would appear when we fly it out. So we want these kind of well spaced so they're easy to tap with a finger or a thumb. We don't want them to have, be too close together. So we give those plenty of padding. That's working fine there. And last thing we want to do is make sure that the anchor tags here are set to display of block by default. You can see the issue here is when I hover over these with my mouse, I have to be right on the actual text. If I hover over here, then I'm not getting the clicker to click. So you can fix that by saying .menu lia and setting that to be display of block. And now when I hover over here, notice I can come clear over here to this right side and it still triggers. Okay. Let's see. Now we want to work a little bit on our logo. We want it to be a little bit different in our nav bar. Typically the logo element or the site title is a little bit bigger. So let's do that. We're going to say .logo anchor tag. And we're going to set the font size here. Whoops, font size to 20 pixels. So you can see that's a little bit bigger. And we're also going to do this as a group selector because we want the dot. Actually, we're not going to do that. We're not going to change our toggle. I was going to try to change the toggle, meaning our bar size with the font size, but we're going to do ours a little bit differently, so that won't affect it. Okay, let's go ahead and do a couple of rules here for the secondary button. So we want to divide the home and about links, or rather, the login and the sign up links separate from the three main menu links. So to do that, we're going to say .button .secondary, and we're going to give it a border bottom of 1 pixel 444 solid. Okay, so you can see that just gave a little bit of a bottom border to these two items. Eventually we're going to move these so they're at the top here above those three using Flexbox. So that pretty much does it for the default styles. Now let's go ahead and work a little bit on the menu here for our mobile view. So I'm just going to do a little CSS comment here and just call this the mobile menu. We'll then do some rules for the tablet and desktop. So on our mobile, let's say .menu. Again, we're going to be using display of flex. So that changes there. We're going to set the flex wrap to actually wrap the items. And we're going to say justify content. We're going to set this to space between and save that. Now it's a little bit tricky to see. I'm going to pull this out here so you can see a little bit better how this is happening. It's kind of a little bit easier to see when we scale this up. But that's kind of how it's behaving right now. And we're going to align the items, to center, which is on the cross axis. So align items in Flexbox works on the cross axis, and justify content works on the main axis if you haven't reversed them. So Flexbox is quite difficult. I'm going to be publishing an in-depth crash course on Flexbox soon, but that's kind of how those properties work. All right, next let's change the toggle. So the toggle right now isn't showing up for us at all because we have that sort of hidden away in that list item. But let's just do a little rule here so we can switch its order. In fact, I'm probably going to build that and turn that on first so you can see that. So let's go ahead and do that first. It is worth noting that the toggle I'm going to be building here is CSS based, but to actually trigger the click on and off, we're going to be using JavaScript. I have a full video on another responsive menu I did where the entire thing is done without any JavaScript with pure CSS, and it's also animated, has a really cool effect. So check that video out for sure if you don't want to use JavaScript, because you can accomplish the same thing we're doing here without JavaScript, but to mix it up, we're going to be doing this one with JavaScript. So let's go ahead and build the bar. So we're going to say .toggle. We're going to actually, I'm going to do this one in a second. I'll just leave the rule there to remind me to come back to it because this will make more sense after I actually build the bar. So remember that our element here is a list item of toggle, and then inside of there's an anchor tag and then a span of bars. And in fact, we actually don't even need this anchor tag, so I'm going to delete it out of here. So we just need the span class, or rather the span. We don't need an anchor tag. So that will do just fine. So we have a toggle and then a span of bars. So let's jump back here to our CSS and let's work on that span tag. So we're going to do a rule for .bars. We're going to set the background to 999. And we're going to set the content property to nothing right here. Actually, sorry, I got ahead of myself. That's going to be on the pseudo element. We're going to set the display to inline block like so. We're going to set the height to 2 pixels. And let me save right here. And why did that not show up? I expected that to show up right here, but I don't see it. Oh, I got to give here a height. Oh, we have to let's give it a position of relative. We have to give it a width. That's the problem. A width of 18 pixels. There we go. Now we can see it. So you can see that just adds one little teeny tiny bar right there for our span tag. And we're going to be transitioning this guy here in a minute. But I think that's really all we need for the default bars. So now we're going to build the top and bottom bar. That was the middle one. So here we'll say dot bars before. We'll do 2 colons here because that's the proper syntax. Both of those actually work. And dot bars after. So this rule is going to affect both the before and after pseudo elements. Kind of the same thing here. I'm just going to really copy all this and paste it in here. Except position is going to be absolute. I don't need to redeclare this. And actually I do need to redeclare that, sorry. And then we're going to add in a content property. So let's say content, and for right now it's going to be blank. Whenever you're working with before and after pseudo elements, you do need that content property to be in there. And that should pretty much do it. Now we just need to move them. So we're going to add one more rule here. Dot bars before, and we're going to say top 5 pixels. And you can see that moves the before element down from the top 5 pixels to create our third set. And we'll copy this, paste it. We'll call this one after, and it's going to be -5 pixels. And now you can see that builds the second one. So that's pretty much all of our bar. Okay, so the reason why we had that toggle up here, now I can finally say cursor, pointer, and save. And now you can see when I'm over here, I get the pointer when I'm on the top of the hamburger menu. So that's what that's for. Now that we have all the little hamburger menu, toggle menu built in place, we can go ahead and style out all the styles now for the actual mobile menu. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, we're going to be using Flexbox for the majority of this. And I'm just going to do this kind of right here after my dot menu. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a rule here for the toggle, and it's going to be order of 1. And we're going to save that. And then we're going to do a rule for the dot item dot button, and it's going to be in order of 2. So you can see that reversed the order here. So now my toggle is ahead of these guys. And we're going to work on the items themselves, so each of the items. And we're going to give them a width of 100%. And we're going to do a text align of center. And you can see now that's how that's looking. So they're all spanning the full width, and the text is in the center of the screen. And we're going to give these guys an order of 3. And you can see now that puts this at the top, these 2 second, and then these 3 third because of the order of 3. And the last thing we're going to do, because we don't want our mobile menu to be out by default, we're going to set the display to none. And that's going to essentially hide that element until we set up our JavaScript to click this element and fly that out, which we're going to do clear at the very end. So I'm just going to invalidate this rule here for a second so that we can see this menu while I also add this last one here, dot item dot active. We're going to set to display of block. So what we're going to be doing in the end in JavaScript is we're going to be adding this active class dynamically to all of our items when we click the hamburger menu. So we're going to click the hamburger menu. JavaScript is going to add that class of active to all of these guys, essentially making them appear. Well, that's what this little rule right here is for. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and come back here and we'll just turn this back on so they're hidden by default. And that's pretty much it for the mobile menu. Let's now come clear down to the bottom and we'll write some rules here for the tablet menu. We'll call this. So tablet menu, and start to add some of this. So we're going to do a media query here. So at media all and a min dash width of, I don't know, 468 pixels. It really doesn't matter here what you're doing for your media query, just wherever your breakpoints are will work fine. And let's add in some code. So we're going to override our menu with .menu. So the first thing we're going to do on a desktop size is we're going to say justify content, and we're going to set that to center. So that kind of, you can see what that does. It justifies the content and adds them to the center. We're going to get our logo, and it's going to be a flex of 1. So it's going to allow it to grow. That's basically the flex grow property there. That's the shorthand, which is different from the default. And our item dot button, we're going to give a width of auto and an order of 1, and we're going to say display block. So that's going to bring in these two elements so that they are now present. Remember, before they're set to display none, so essentially on the media query for tablets, we're turning just the items that have the class of button back on so that they're visible here in our secondary size, which is for our tablets. And let's go ahead and change our toggle. So we're going to say dot toggle, and we're going to give it an order of 2, just to make sure that it's on the other side of those guys. And we want to turn off that little, it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a little bottom border right there you can see. We want to get rid of that as well here. So we'll write a rule for our dot button dot secondary, and we're going to say just border of 0, and that gets rid of that border there. And then we'll mess around with our anchor tags. So now we're actually going to do quite a bit of styling to really add some dimension to these buttons. So we'll just do a rule here for button anchor, and we're going to give it some padding. We'll say 7 pixels and 15 pixels. You can now see that add a little bit of padding there. We're going to set the background just to teal. That's just going to give it a background color, you can see, of teal. And let's give them a border of 1 pixel solid and 006D. 6D. That's the one in my note. Maybe that's the same color as teal. I don't know. I think that's slightly darker. And then we're going to give these guys a border radius of 50 ems, which is just going to make them look like pills. Whoops, border dash radius. Let's fix that little typo. And you can see that just kind of rounds off those corners there on those 2 buttons. Now let's change this secondary one so it's just an outline without a background. So dot button dot secondary space A. We're just going to set the background to transparent. And that's kind of how it looks now. So we have a filled in button and we have a secondary hollow button. So that's working fine now. And let's go ahead and add these guys in some hover states. So dot button A colon hover, so anchor hover. Let's go ahead and set the text. Don't need to do that. We'll set the transition. Transition all 0.25 seconds. And that's probably all we need to do on that guy. Oh, when we hover over these, we do have the underline. So let's go ahead and get rid of that on hover. So in fact, we're just going to do this by default on our anchor tag, text-decoration none. That should follow through because that property is inherited to these pseudo-selected states. Okay, so we have our transition on there. Let's write another rule here. So dot button not. So this is the not pseudo class. We're going to say anything that's not the class of secondary, hover. And you're going to change the background. So background, we're going to say is 006D6D. And the border dash color is 005959. Whoops, we need a pound sign. Okay. So now let's try that out. So you can see now when we hover over, we get that little transition. And we have a little animation there for the background color changing. And we could do something on the other one as well. So let's do button.secondary hover. We could do this another way. I just wanted to show you really what the not class looks like there as well. And we'll say color DDD. So in other words, when we hover, it's going to have a slightly different color. It's going to be really hard to see, but you can see that font color itself changes on the hover on this one, and when we hover on this one, the background color changes and the border technically. Okay, so we have a couple of states there for those buttons to separate them, and that looks great. Lastly, let's go ahead and do our desktop menu. But before we get there, let's just check out how these two states are working. So here we have our mobile. Of course, those two buttons disappear. We have our tablet where they reappear, and then we'll do now the desktop, which is going to be, something up at this size. So another media query at media all and a min width of 768 pixels, we'll say, for this guy, for this media query. So the first one we're going to do is the item. So we'll say dot item, and we're going to change that to display block. And you can see that automatically, of course, makes these guys appear again like we did before. Similar thing to what we did before. Let me move that mic back into view. And we're going to give these guys a width of auto, which is going to make them shrink down and not take up 100% wide, but really the width of whatever their content is. So that's what width auto does for us. Next, we're going to change the toggle, because we don't want that at all here. So we're going to say display none so that the hamburger menu is gone on desktop view. And dot logo. Whoops. Here's where we're going to mess around with the order. So we'll say order is 0 for the logo, which is kind of where it's already at, but we want to declare it because we're going to be declaring other orders as well. And then we're going to say dot item. So anything with the class of item is going to have an order of 1. Which is going to be next to this one. So now those ones sit in the front. And then just to finish off declaring all of these, anything with the class of button is going to be set to the order of 2, which they're already in, but of course we want to just make sure we declare each of those individually. Okay, now let's just change the padding here a little bit. So let's say dot menu list item. So we'll set the padding to 15 pixels and 10 pixels. Space those out a little bit more horizontally there. And we'll say dot menu list item dot button. We're going to set the padding. Whoops. We'll set the padding dash right to 0. And that's going to make sure that this guy, right, didn't have that double padding, that padding right on the last one we set to 0. So there we have that. And that is pretty much it for the HTML. So we have our desktop, we have our tablet, and then we have our mobile. So you can see how we can show and hide different elements with Flexbox. We can reposition them left, right, up, and down. So that's pretty much it for the design. Now we're going to move over to JavaScript and hook up this little toggle here so that when we click it, we can see our actual menu on mobile view. So we're going to jump over here to our HTML to do that. Let's cruise up here to the top in our head section, and we'll add a couple of style tags, not style, rather script tags for our JavaScript. Now you could do this with vanilla JavaScript really easy. We're just going to throw in jQuery to do this. And again, you don't need to use JavaScript at all to do this. In my other video, I show you how to do this exact same thing with pure CSS, which is really cool. So let's go ahead and we're going to link up to the jQuery first. So I'm going to copy that from jQuery.com. So we'll just head over here and we'll come down to wherever they put the CDN. Here we go. Download, and we'll get the compressed production version. Whoops, we don't want the download. We want, where's the link here for the CDN? Somewhere down here. CDNs. Oh, I don't need to know what a CDN is. jQuery, just give me a dang link. Google. Okay, good enough. So we'll copy this little guy right here and paste it up into our head section so that we can pull in jQuery. And now we can jQuery on ready. I'm just going to copy this as well so we can have our on ready event. So jQuery, if you're not familiar with that, of course, this isn't a course on jQuery, but this little function right here makes it so the entire, the code we write won't execute until the full HTML and CSS is loaded. So let's go ahead and delete that little test and let's write our own code. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is write a jQuery, little jQuery toggle here. So we're going to say dot toggle, and then we're going to use the on click event. So we're going to say on, we're going to listen for the click event. And when that one happens, we'll execute our anonymous function here. And we're going to write some code. So in other words, when we click our toggle button, do the following. We're going to write an if statement. So we're going to say if the dot item. So if our items has class of active, let's pull this over a little bit so you can see this. Okay, so if our elements that have the class of item have the class of active, then do the following. We actually want to remove the class. So let's just write the else here. So if they already have the class, then take it away. So we're going to say, and again, this is not the best. We could probably set this up in a variable instead of having to redo it every time, but that's okay. Dot remove class of active. Okay, so when we click our element, if the item already has the class of active, this basically takes that away. Otherwise, add it. So I just pasted that down there. Instead of remove class, we're going to say add class. So if it doesn't have the class, then we add the class of active. And that's pretty much it for the JavaScript. So let's go ahead and test it out now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say inspect element so you can see this down here live. So we're going to open up the main, and let's open up, no, sorry, not main, the nav, unordered list, so you can see all these guys. Okay, so watch all of these list items that have the class of item. So we're going to come down here. So when I click this, notice how all of those got the class of active because they didn't already have it. When I click this again, they all lose the class of active. And that's basically all there is to showing and hiding the little menu on mobile. Again, we're not doing animation. We're not animating the little hamburger menu bars and all that stuff. Just real basic JavaScript to show and hide that menu. And now our nav bar is finally fully complete. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So there's our desktop. There's our mobile. We can still toggle out just those three on the tablet view. And then finally down to mobile, we can toggle out all of them. And notice the order changes. On mobile, they're not designed, and there's a little bottom border there, the login and sign up. on tablet view, we just have login and sign up, and then these 3 links are in the menu here. And then on desktop view, these 3 links appear before the 2 buttons. And all of that is done with the beauty of Flexbox. And just with a couple of properties of Flexbox, we could easily, if you wanted these 3 links right here in the center, we could do that. We could swap things around. Really cool what you can do with Flexbox as far as positioning your elements in a one-dimensional axis. So that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you learned something. Subscribe, comment, thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next one.